My sister married my ex-fiancé, but I revealed his darkest secret at the wedding. On her big day, I stood up and exposed the truth he tried to bury, leaving my sister in shock and him unable to hide anymore. I never thought I'd live to see the day my sister walked down the aisle toward the man I was once supposed to marry. The church was filled with flowers, music, and whispers, but all I could hear was the pounding in my chest. Years earlier, I had been the one in that white dress, preparing to say yes to him. But destiny, betrayal, and secrets had rearranged everything. I stood among the guests, smiling faintly as if I were just another spectator. No one suspected that behind that smile, I carried knowledge sharp enough to slice through the celebration. My sister's happiness glowed like sunlight, but beneath it lurked shadows only I could see. And when the vows began, I knew my moment was coming. Because I wasn't just here as a guest. I was here as the keeper of a truth so heavy it had crushed me once, and now it was about to crush them both. When I first met Daniel, I thought he was everything I had ever dreamed of, charming, ambitious, the kind of man who knew how to light up a room. My parents adored him, my friends envied me, and my sister? She smiled, but her eyes lingered too long. I brushed it off at the time, thinking I was imagining things. Our engagement came fast, maybe too fast, but I was in love. We started planning the wedding, choosing the flowers, the dress, even the honeymoon. Everything looked perfect from the outside, yet something in my gut never let me sleep peacefully. Daniel was attentive, yes, but sometimes his phone would light up at night with messages he wouldn't explain. Back then, I silenced my doubts because love makes you blind. I didn't realize that those secrets would later become the very weapon I'd use on the day my sister tried to claim him for herself. It happened 6 months before our planned wedding. I woke up one night to find Daniel missing from our bed. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, screen glowing in the dark. Normally, I respected his privacy, but something about that moment pushed me over the edge. I picked it up. The message read, "I can't stop thinking about last night. She can't know." My stomach dropped. I scrolled further, and there it was, my sister's name. Beatrice. My own flesh and blood, the person who once cried on my shoulder over failed relationships, was the one he was sneaking around with. The betrayal hit like fire in my chest. The man I had promised forever and the sister I trusted most had been weaving lies behind my back. I didn't confront them immediately. Instead, I stayed quiet, burning in silence, because deep inside I knew, if they wanted each other so badly, I'd let them destroy themselves. But first, I'd learn Daniel's darkest secret, the kind of truth you can only hide for so long. Daniel thought he was clever, but secrets have a way of leaving traces. While he was busy covering his tracks with sweet words to my sister, I started digging. I checked old emails, bills, even the drawer he kept locked in his office. That's when I found it, a letter from a woman I didn't know, written years ago. Her words were desperate, trembling with fear. She begged him to stay away, said he had ruined her life, that she would never forgive him for what he'd done. The letter mentioned something darker than infidelity. It hinted at manipulation, threats, and a past Daniel had buried under layers of charm. My hands shook as I read it over and over. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It wasn't just that he had chosen my sister over me. He was dangerous, and she had no idea. That's when I made my decision. If Beatrice wanted to marry him, she would walk into that church blind. But I would be the one to open her eyes, no matter how much it hurt. From that day on, I played my part flawlessly. At family dinners, I smiled politely when Daniel and Beatrice arrived hand in hand. When my mother whispered how perfect they looked together, I nodded as if I agreed. Inside, though, I was memorizing every lie, every crack in their story. Daniel avoided looking at me whenever we were in the same room. That told me everything. He knew I had once been his fiancé. He knew I could ruin him with a single sentence. But Beatrice, blinded by her excitement and jealousy, never noticed. She thought she'd won. In reality, I was waiting for the right stage. And what better stage than their wedding? A day where every guest, every relative, every friend would be watching. Where no truth could be swept under the rug. I stayed quiet, holding on to the secret letter, the evidence that Daniel wasn't the man he pretended to be. I promised myself one thing: I wouldn't just expose him. I would make sure everyone saw the monster he really was. The morning of the wedding felt surreal. My sister's house buzzed with laughter, makeup brushes, and champagne flutes clinking. Beatrice glowed in her lace gown, twirling in front of the mirror, asking me if she looked beautiful. I forced a smile and said she did. She had no idea that in just a few hours, her dream would shatter. Daniel arrived late, wearing his usual polished grin, shaking hands with relatives, pretending to be the perfect groom. But I watched him closely, the way his jaw tightened when he caught my eye, the way his hand trembled slightly as he fixed his cufflinks. He knew the secret between us wasn't buried. Guests filled the pews, the air heavy with perfume and expectation. My mother whispered how proud she was that Beatrice had found such a good man. I bit my tongue so hard it nearly bled. As the music began and Beatrice stepped into the aisle, I clutched the folded letter in my purse. My moment was coming, and no amount of flowers or vows would be able to protect him once I spoke. The ceremony began with all the elegance my parents had dreamed of. White roses cascaded down the altar, a string quartet played softly, and Beatrice glided down the aisle with the biggest smile I'd ever seen on her face. She looked radiant, almost untouchable, as if the universe itself had chosen this moment to bless her. But for me, each note of the music rang like a countdown. Daniel stood waiting at the altar, hands clasped in front of him, pretending to be calm. I knew that look. I had seen it before, on nights when his lies were just a little too messy, when he was gambling with more than money. My sister, blinded by love and rivalry, had no clue she was walking into a trap that would crush her spirit. The priest's voice rose and echoed through the hall. "We are gathered here today to celebrate the union." I barely heard the rest. My mind kept flashing back to that letter, the one written by a woman Daniel had left broken. It wasn't just the words. It was the raw desperation in the ink, the way she said he had taken everything from her, how she warned he would do it again. I had researched her name, found fragments of her story buried online. She had been engaged once, too. She had trusted him, too. And she had ended up alone, bankrupt, and terrified of what he might still do to her if she spoke. I realized then that Daniel didn't just betray women, he consumed them. He left trails of wreckage behind him while wearing that same polished smile he now flashed at the guests. The priest continued, "If anyone here knows a reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." The silence was immediate, thick, suffocating. Everyone's eyes stayed fixed on the bride and groom, expecting nothing more than the rehearsed, "I do." My heartbeat thundered in my ears. This was the moment. My fingers brushed against the letter hidden in my purse. I could stay silent, let Beatrice live out her fantasy, and watch her crumble later as I once did. Or I could stand up, tear away the mask Daniel wore, and let the truth detonate here, in front of everyone. I stood. The scrape of my chair against the polished floor was deafening. Heads turned. My mother gasped softly. Beatrice froze halfway through a smile, confusion painted across her face. "I have something to say," I heard my own voice declare, steady despite the storm inside me. Daniel's eyes locked on mine instantly. For a split second, panic flickered through his mask. Then he tried to recover, tilting his head with a charming grin, as if I were just a nervous ex desperate for attention. But I wasn't nervous anymore. I was done being quiet. I was supposed to marry this man, I said, my words cutting through the silence. Gasps rippled across the room. Beatrice's bouquet shook in her hands. And I broke it off, not because I stopped loving him, but because I discovered what he really is. A murmur swept through the guests. My father half rose from his seat, his face tight with anger, but I pressed on, louder this time. This man is a liar. A manipulator. He has done to others what he is about to do to my sister, destroy her life. I have proof. And with that, I pulled the folded letter from my purse and held it up for everyone to see. My voice trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of truth finally unleashed. This is from a woman who came before me. She begged him to stop tormenting her after he bled her dry. She warned that he would move on to someone else and do it again. And here he is, standing at this altar, pretending to be a loving man. He isn't. He's a predator who uses marriage like a weapon. The room erupted in whispers, disbelief, and shock. Beatrice's face went pale. She looked at Daniel, searching for denial, for comfort, for some explanation. But his mask was cracking. His lips tightened, his eyes darted, and in that instant, everyone saw what I had known all along. This isn't love, I said finally, my voice breaking. It's a performance. And I won't let my sister walk into the same darkness I barely escaped. The priest stood frozen. Guests whispered furiously. My mother covered her mouth, my father's fists clenched, and Beatrice's bouquet slipped from her trembling hands. Daniel opened his mouth to speak, to spin another lie, but the damage was done. And as I sank back into my seat, my sister's wide, tear-filled eyes told me she finally understood, this wedding was over before it even began. Chaos erupted the second my words settled into the air. The whispers grew into gasps, the gasps into murmurs, and soon it was like a storm inside the church. Beatrice stood frozen at the altar, her hands clutching the lace of her gown, eyes darting between me and Daniel as if the walls themselves were closing in on her. Lies, Daniel snapped suddenly, his voice sharp enough to cut through the noise. He tried to smile, tried to play the part he had perfected so well, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. She's just bitter, angry that I moved on. Isn't that right? He looked around the crowd, begging for their support with his practiced charm. But his act was falling flat. I pulled the letter from my purse, unfolded it, and read aloud, "You ruined me, Daniel. You took everything, my savings, my peace, my dignity. And when I had nothing left to give, you walked away laughing." The words echoed in the vaulted ceiling like a curse. Gasps rippled through the pews. My aunt clutched her pearls. My cousin muttered something under her breath. Beatrice's voice finally cracked through the silence. "Is this true?" she asked, her voice trembling. Her mascara was already smudged, and the confidence she had worn all morning was gone. Daniel's jaw tightened. He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. He turned his glare on me. "You don't know what you're talking about. That woman was unstable, obsessed. She made things up. She tried to destroy me when I left her." "Funny," I replied coldly, "that's the exact same story you told about me when I walked away. You've rehearsed it well, haven't you?" The church was a battlefield now. Half the guests whispered in defense of Beatrice, the other half stared at Daniel with suspicion. My father rose to his feet, his face red with fury. "Enough," he barked. "This is your sister's wedding. How dare you?" But I cut him off. "How dare I? How dare he? You think this is about jealousy? No, Dad. This is about saving Beatrice from the same hell I endured. You didn't see me after he drained my bank account, after I caught him with other women, after I realized every promise he made was a performance. But I lived it. And I'll be damned if I let my sister live it too." Daniel's mask was cracking fast. His face twisted into something raw, something ugly, something none of these guests had ever seen before. "You think you're better than me?" he hissed, his charm gone now, replaced by the venom I had known in private. "You're pathetic. You always were. That's why I left you." The words cut deep, but instead of breaking me, they fueled me. I straightened, my voice steady. You didn't leave me, Daniel. I left you. Because I saw the monster beneath the mask. And now, so has everyone else. Beatrice's bouquet slipped from her hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud. She shook her head slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. I thought you loved me, she whispered. Daniel reached for her again, desperate now. Listen. But she pulled away, her voice rising in fury. Don't you dare call me that. Don't you dare. The church fell silent except for her sobs. The guests were watching her unravel, watching the fairy tale collapse. My mother sat with her hands pressed to her mouth, unable to breathe. My father's rage had dissolved into something else entirely, shame. Beatrice finally turned to me, her eyes wide, her voice breaking. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I swallowed hard. Because you wouldn't have believed me. Because you wanted to win. And I needed you to see the truth with your own eyes. The weight of it all settled heavily in the room. The priest, pale and uncomfortable, quietly closed his book. The ceremony was over, though no one dared to say it out loud. Daniel stood alone now, his charm stripped away, his lies scattered like broken glass at his feet. And for the first time, everyone saw him exactly as he was. And I finally felt free. The aftermath was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. Beatrice ripped off her veil, her hands shaking so violently she nearly tore it in half. Guests shifted uncomfortably in the pews, some whispering, others openly staring at the groom who suddenly looked nothing like the man they thought they knew. Daniel tried again, desperation leaking from every word. You have to believe me. She's twisting everything. I love you, I chose you, not her. He gestured toward me with venom, as if pointing me out would magically erase the evidence. But my sister wasn't looking at him anymore. She was staring at the letter in my hands, at the ink smeared from where my fingers had gripped it too tightly. She whispered, almost to herself, "It's the same handwriting I saw in his drawer, weeks ago." The room gasped again. Daniel froze. I turned slowly, meeting her gaze. "You saw it too?" Beatrice nodded, tears streaming down her face. I asked him about it. He said it was from a stalker. I wanted to believe him so badly, her voice broke into a sob. God, what have I done? That was the breaking point. She staggered back, almost falling into my mother's arms. My father moved toward Daniel, fists clenched, his voice low and dangerous. "Get out." Daniel scoffed, his mask flickering between anger and arrogance. "You're all fools. You'll regret this. She's jealous, can't you see? She couldn't handle losing me, so she came here to ruin your perfect little fairy tale." But no one believed him anymore. His words hung in the air, hollow and weak. The Daniel they admired was gone, replaced by the raw, venomous man I'd known behind closed doors. He looked at me one last time, his eyes burning with hatred. "You think you've won? You'll always be nothing without me." For the first time, I didn't flinch. I looked him straight in the eye and replied calmly, "No, Daniel. For the first time in years, I'm everything without you." With that, my father grabbed his arm and shoved him toward the aisle. Guests parted like waves, staring in disgust as the man who once charmed them all stumbled out of the church, his tie crooked, his face twisted in rage. The heavy wooden doors slammed shut behind him, and silence fell. Beatrice collapsed into a pew, sobbing, while my mother stroked her hair with trembling hands. The ceremony was over. The wedding was destroyed. But the truth was finally free. And as I stood there, clutching the letter like a battle flag, I realized this wasn't just about revenge. It was survival. It was reclaiming the voice he had stolen from me. For the first time, the shame wasn't mine anymore, it was his. The hours that followed felt unreal, like drifting through the aftermath of a storm. Guests left in stunned silence, their elegant outfits and polite smiles useless against the scandal that had unfolded before their eyes. Some offered awkward nods to me as they slipped out, others avoided my gaze entirely, as if truth were contagious. Beatrice remained in the pew, her face buried in her hands. I stood a few feet away, torn between comfort and distance. She had betrayed me once, yes, but she had also been a victim, blinded by the very lies that had once chained me. Finally, she lifted her head, eyes swollen. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she whispered. "But, thank you. You saved me." I hesitated, the weight of years of rivalry pressing on my chest. Then I said softly, "You'll have to save yourself now. But at least, you'll get the chance to." Our mother was crying quietly, our father pacing like a man whose authority had cracked in half. None of them knew what to say. For once, I didn't care. My voice had been heard, my truth had shattered the mask Daniel had worn for so long. As I walked out of the church into the cool afternoon air, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. The sky above was still, almost too calm after what had just happened. The future was uncertain, relationships broken, wounds still bleeding, but the silence inside me had lifted. Daniel's shadow no longer loomed over my life. And though my sister's wedding ended in ashes, I knew I had chosen the only path I could. Because sometimes the bravest act of love isn't silence, it's tearing down the lies, no matter how many hearts break in the process. For the first time, I was no longer the girl who had been left at the altar. I was the woman who stood up, revealed the truth, and walked away unchained.